You're listening to Homeschool Connections, brought to you by the Homeschool Research Lab at the Johns Hopkins School of Education Institute for Education Policy. The Homeschool Research Lab aims to inform and influence evidence-based education policy by expanding access to homeschool data and conducting high-quality research. Through our Homeschool Hub and diverse collaborative efforts, we provide unbiased information, share rigorous academic studies, and translate findings into actionable policy insights that can ultimately benefit all students, including those that are homeschooled. I'm Christy Batts, a research fellow for the lab. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest research, data, and insights surrounding homeschooling. We'll dispel myths, inform stakeholders, and advance evidence-driven discussions. I'm here today with Nina Buchanan, and she is a professor emeritus of the University of Hawaii. She is a co-founder of the American Education Research Association's School Choice and Charters Special Interest Group and the International School Choice and Reform Conference, and West Hawaii Explorations Academy, which is one of the first charter schools in Hawaii. And she is also a consulting editor of the Journal of School Choice. Thank you for being here with us, Nina.
I'm so excited to talk about something that has been a part of my life for many years. So, alternative education and the understanding that a one-size system doesn't work for everybody.
That's a great place to start. So, what are some of the highlights of your many years of work in school choice research?
Well, I think any of the research we do starts with us as people and our experiences. And early on, I was a non-traditional college student. So I ended up falling into teaching for a year. It was frowned upon not to come through a university and have a credential, which I didn't have a credential. So thankfully, creative people at Montana State University enabled me to get my teaching credential and master's degree in education at the same time in 1974. I became a teacher. I started the first gifted program in my district, and I had a child, and the system didn't work for my child. He was a gifted student who had asynchronous development, and he was being told he was failing at school. This was unacceptable, so even though I worked for the school district, I took my own child out and homeschooled him. And it was tough going, but that was my first experience with homeschooling. So then that began my journey in research in homeschooling and other alternatives to the traditional public education, and eventually to charter schools as well. And lately, I've been working as an unpaid consultant for the homeschool community in Hawaii.
I definitely want to ask you about that and about your experience and knowledge about your local homeschool community. Before I ask you about that, I'm curious about how you've seen the homeschool research change through your many years in this field.
Well, I think one of the first articles I did in homeschooling was a special issue of Roper Review, which was a gifted journal. It amazed me that there was almost no research on homeschooling. So having someone write an article, I had a parent who homeschooled her own kids, and she did an article on that, but we together could find very, very little research. And a lot of it was opinion, and a lot of it was based on not enough data. As I got further into homeschooling, I became interested in following the data, and that was limited in my own state. It's improving. That's the good news. There are people like you who are actually taking homeschool research seriously, and that is a great sign. I can credit Brian Ray and the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund and what they have done, but sadly, I see a lot of holes in the research even now.
What are some of those gaps?
For starters, we never have a very accurate and detailed account about who is homeschooled. Even though there are regulations, I know from my own experience that many homeschoolers stay under the radar. And so starting off getting those accurate figures. Then I think the trick is getting involved in the homeschool community as a trusted person so that they would be willing to participate in research. Because as you know, when you try to do research and you do your IRB, you need to provide them with an opportunity to opt out. And we oftentimes lose the most interesting subjects because they opt out. So that's another place where researchers need to start at the grassroots and build those relationships and then begin getting more accurate data, both in who's homeschooling and how they're doing it. So I see that gap. And there's a big gap between the foes who say we can't have homeschooling because kids are abused. We can't have homeschooling because they won't learn. We can't have homeschooling because parents aren't qualified. And the list goes on. So people throw a lot of stones at homeschooling, and it behooves researchers to do a better job of taking their complaints seriously and addressing them through data, evidence, not just, oh, I feel like it's better, and I know it's better for my child. Not good enough. So that's another area where I'd like to see lots of attention put in a way that encourages the research at the same time as dispelling the myths. And I know people have written some articles on that, but that's not enough. We need more evidence. And then the last portion I think we're very weak on is longitudinal studies of kids who were homeschooled and following them through the path and looking at the path. At a certain age, the kids want to go back to public schools, and they may go back and they may do the rest of their career there, or they may choose to homeschool again, but nobody tracks those carefully enough, so we know what paths there are. Also, in that longitudinal study, how do we build in assessments or things worth measuring that we can do comparison studies, carefully controlled comparison studies, where we're not just lumping all traditional kids in and all homeschool kids in and saying, what's the difference? That doesn't work.
That's a tall order because the lack of data, some of the studies that we know to have been done have some sampling bias. And so how do we go about that?
Right. It's got to be tied to your grassroots local, because otherwise you may be getting a false idea. And we get enough of those grassroots, then you can begin to put it together and make sense of it.
It really is the type of challenge that the field needs to hone in on and focus on to help us ground our work and have a meaningful path forward for this line of research.
One would hope.
Okay, so I want to shift and ask about what's happening in the Hawaiian homeschool community.
I think Hawaii is a good case that can inform ways to research in other places as well. Many times people say, well, Hawaii is different. Well, yes, we're different, but there are a lot of insights you can gain. For example, the first one is that geography matters and where you live matters, and the whole ecology around that matters. Because in Hawaii, we have our habitable islands. And even though we are a one district state, the further you get from the center of power, which is in Oahu, a small little island in the middle of the chain, the further you get from that, the less attention is given to your needs and the needs of the students. And so the further you get, you're really in a whole different education system. And the Big Island is a good example of that because it is a very rural place. It's pretty hard to get just to the other side of the island. And the powers that be have bought in to the efficiency of consolidation. We had the largest high schools almost in the nation. I mean, we had huge high schools, even though we're a rural and relatively small population. All of those factors figure in to homeschooling. If you are assigned to a school that is a long way away or very hard to get to, then you begin to rethink, well, maybe I don't want to drive that every day. And of course, the buses don't drive it either. No, that doesn't happen because it is really rural. So that poses problems. But it's also a place where there are certain pockets of less opportunity to make a living. And so the socioeconomics of the different areas of the island are different. So now you've got a compounding factor. And then there are other things going on, like race in Hawaii makes a difference. So all of those things together really are good examples for those kind of things that you have to look at before you can start saying just blanket why most of the people there homeschool, because there isn't. Most of the people do it for that reason.
Yeah, I want to ask you about some of those factors. So let's start with race.
Well, like everywhere else, I think people tend to congregate in their tribes. In Hawaii, there are no majority races in Hawaii. Now, you throw in an individual child who is placed in a school that is predominantly another race and they don't fit, that's another reason to homeschool. And if you are isolated in a community that is a lower socioeconomic community and your schools are rated poorly and your kid may be going to be teased. So all of those factors are important. And I might throw in, because I've looked at the gender spread of who's being homeschooled, it's not surprising to me that it's the boys. Our system is not built to serve boys well. Even though I'm a member of several organizations that support educating women and girls, it's the boys who are struggling, and there are more of them being homeschooled than girls.
Is that something unique to Hawaii?
I don't think so, but it's not unique to the program of homeschool, because starting a gifted program for Native Hawaiian students back in the early 90s, we had a terrible time recruiting boys. We were overrepresented with girls, 60 to 70%. And we spent a lot of time on the curriculum trying to figure out how to attract boys. But obviously, we all need to spend a lot more time on that problem. And so I'm not surprised that the statistics show that there's such a high percentage of boys on the Big Island, and it varies from island to island.
You're talking about the homeschool participation rates.
Yes, the homeschool participation rates.
Mm-hmm. And there's something else that we've noticed in the homeschool hub data is there's more younger grade students in Hawaii homeschooling than any other grade, let's say ages 6 to 10. What factors might be influencing that, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because that happens both in the homeschool population, but also in the Hawaiian immersion programs, that the kids are good in the elementary and hit that middle school wall and want to be back with their peers and don't want to be distinguished from them. So it doesn't surprise me that the kind of reverse phenomena, you've been happily homeschooled till you're maybe 5th grade. And my Hanai family, that's the case. They had been homeschooled all their career and come to 5th grade. No, I really want to go to school now. And it's a tough decision. I understand it puts the parents in a big dilemma.
I'm also thinking about how far apart are elementary schools on the islands. Are they also consolidated like the high schools?
Well, they are bigger than I would like to see them, and they are considered feeders for the middle school and the high school can certainly be a factor. It was for my friend who homeschools because she had a 45-minute drive to get her kids to the school, and it was over undeveloped roads. So homeschooling them was a good alternative, and they did well in it. So I think there are a lot of factors like that. And then there are those parents who choose to live out in the jungle, to live out in the less developed places on the Big Island where they can be back to the land and they can school their own kids. And that's a big factor. And those kids are less likely to choose, in my experience, to go back into the schools. So that's you have to go in at the level and know the families, know their issues, and they have to trust you enough to tell you about it.
We've been talking about the Big Island and its rurality, but thinking about Oahu and the military community there, do you have any insight about the homeschooling community with the military?
No, I really don't. I haven't been plugged into them because we don't have that on the Big Island, so I haven't. Every community is different. And wouldn't it be nice if we knew? Because there are failings in the system. You can have a policy that on paper looks good, but it doesn't necessarily work. In Hawaii, before you homeschool, you must do a letter of intent. You must deliver it to the principal of the school to which your child would be assigned. And it's hit and miss who collects that data and whether it actually gets on the book somewhere or whether someone actually writes back to the parent.
From my understanding, there's an annual report that Hawaiian homeschooling families have to turn into that same closest principal.
Yes, exactly. And it's clearly spelled out in law, but the implementation is very weak. So the numbers you get that are reported by the Department of Education may not be nearly correct. It will capture all of the parents who knew what the law was, who followed it. But the problem with that is, even along the way, they may drop out of the reporting because nobody ever gives them feedback.
Okay, so they could still be homeschooling, but then just
Get tired of putting in a report that nobody seems to read. Nobody comes after them if they don't report. So there's a big gap in the administration taking responsibility. And I understand, I'm not blaming those schools. The principal is overloaded. He assigns the task to somebody else, member of his staff. It could be a counselor, it could be a clerk, and the system is not very well structured.
Is that something that you were indicating that homeschool families might appreciate some feedback?
Absolutely. The ones that I interact with all the time, they would be more than happy because they are doing a really good job. You know, several of them were teachers before they gave that up to homeschool their own children, and they might like a little pat on the back too. Hey, you know, you're doing well, but you don't get it. And in Hawaii, the parents are supposed to report achievement in that report, and they're encouraged to have their kids do the tests, but it's very easy to opt out of the tests, the ones that all the public school kids take.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. It's really very localized from state to state. I guess the advantage of Hawaii is because it is one LEA across the whole state.
Right. Exactly.
That it does kind of condense the policies a little bit further. So
yes, the policies are clear and they're not bad, but it's how they're implemented and who implements them. And the person who is taking in the information has a personal reason for doing a good job.
I'm curious about what projects you're working on currently that you're most excited about?
I am most excited about mentoring the next generation who are going to do this research that we need because I'm not going to be around to do it. And there are a lot of aging academics who are not going to be here. So I have been spending more of my time mentoring and working in the homeschooling, feeding them resources and information and being willing to come and give them feedback and the kinds of activities that they're doing as as cooperative groups are really wonderful for kids. So that's more I'm coaching, advising, providing resources, saying go for it and go for it. I've got my cheerleader outfit on.
We appreciate it. And I think that we can all learn from your insights. So please do as much of that as you have time and energy for.
Yes, I'll try. Every parent should be empowered to make some choices about their children's education. Not every parent should be a homeschool parent. So it's good that they're not. Not every kid should go to a particular type of school, but the school should adapt to the kid, ideally. I guess I wish education could move toward more idiosyncratic education for children so that we move with the kids' interests and try to support them and get them the knowledge that they need. With so much technology and information available, one should think we should move toward that more idiosyncratic. It doesn't have to be too prescriptive, but better to educate a whole child. And that means body and being healthy and physical, as well as their mental and their sense of self and spiritual person. You have to have all those, that moral base. So how we ever get there, I don't know. I keep trying, and my charter school does a good job. And it's hard to keep on that focus and focus on the kids and try to provide what they need at the stage they need it, just on time learning. But I'm depending on you guys to do it now, all the young people. There's some great young people in the field today. So go for it.
Thank you for the encouragement. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for all the work that you've done to lead up to where the field is today. School choice research would not have a foothold if you had not started the SIG at AERA, if you had not started the conference, and also participate as the editor of the leading journal on school choice.
Well, I appreciate those thoughts, but I would say that those of us who engage in this get as much back as we give. I've always gotten back as much as I've given and more. And so it's not a case of sacrificing to do this. It's a joy. It's been a joy.
Thanks for joining us for an episode of the Homeschool Connections. For more resources, research, and data, connect with us on social media at JHU Homeschool or visit us online at education.jhu.edu/edpolicy, where you can click through to explore the Homeschool Hub and scroll down to sign up for our newsletter. If today's episode sparked ideas or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Christy Batts with the Johns Hopkins Homeschool Research Lab.